Penguin Random House Audio presents The Almost Legendary Morris Sisters, a true story of family fiction. This is the author, Julie Klam. Though it's like looking for a needle in a haystack, still I'll follow every little clue, for I've got to find you. Although I've lost you, we'll meet again, I know. It's just like looking for a needle in a haystack, searching for a moonbeam in the blue. Still, I've got to find you. It's just like looking for a raindrop in the ocean, searching for a dewdrop in the dew. Still, I'll follow every little clue, for I've got to find you. Ruth Etting, A Needle in a Haystack. A Guide to the Morris Sisters. Selma Morris, the eldest, born in November 1893 in Romania, died in Southampton, New York in May of 1991. Talked incessantly, was bossy, chain smoker, very pretty with a beautiful singing voice. She spent most of her life working as a sales lady for various stores in New York City. Never married. Malvina Morris, born March 11, 1899 in Romania. Died January 17, 1994 in Southampton. Physically disabled since childhood due to a birth defect, was known as the kindest of the sisters, worked as a bookkeeper, chain smoker, never married. Marcella Morris, born September 30, 1901 in Romania. Died August 18, 1997 in Southampton. A financial wizard, prickly, personality, chain smoker, never married. Ruth Morris, born February 15, 1904, in St. Louis, Missouri, died in January of 1978 in Southampton. The youngest and the only member of the family born in the United States. Considered bohemian, writer, was once briefly married, first of the sisters to die. A note on names and dates. A brother, Samuel Morris, born in 1897 in Romania, was the only boy and lived most of his life in Texas. It is inevitable in genealogical research that you come across inconsistencies with names and dates. I have tried my best to keep the information in this book accurate, but there were times when someone spelled a name differently or misremembered a date. In my research, I came across the Morris sisters' father's name written as Gershon Bernhardt, Gerson, Garrison, and George Bernard. I decided to be consistent by just using Garrison because I believe that is how it was spelled in Romania, but you'll hear that in various places other people call him George or Gershon, and dates varied a great deal. This guide to the Morris sisters includes the dates I've determined to be correct because they are the ones that appeared most often. It's also where I landed on eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Chapter 1. I'd like to introduce my family. When I was 5 years old, I noticed that my second toe was longer than my other toes. I noticed this because my Grandma Billy, my father's mother, had pointed out how beautiful her own feet were because her toes were graduated. They were sized in ascending order. Then she looked at my feet and was silent. Later, I mentioned to my mother what Grandma Billy had said, and she replied with extraordinary conviction, "People who have a long second toe are descended from royalty." My mother, I realized later, also has a long second toe. We were the queen and the princess of the land of goofy feet. At the time, I was young enough and unworldly enough that I accepted her explanation, and I knew instinctively that it wasn't something I was to talk about with other people. I didn't need to flaunt my superior lineage. I just kept the information in my back pocket, like an undercover detective with a hidden badge. If I needed to reveal it, I could, but mostly it was enough for me to know. I've never taken a DNA test or any of the other tests available, mostly because I don't really care to know what someone else finds in me. I'm descended from royalty. Does anything else really matter? I'm willing to admit that I might not be Queen Elizabeth's distant cousin, but somewhere inside me, that little fact, along with many, many other questionable details that I was told about my family growing up, floats around in my personal identity orbit and gives me a gentle pat on the back when life gets tricky. It's okay when my credit card gets declined. I am descended from royalty. When a friend of mine found out that her husband had been having affairs for 17 of the 18 years they were together, through 4 pregnancies and years of romantic vacations, she had the most difficult time reconciling the life she thought she'd led with the one she'd actually had, and also reconciling herself with the fact that if she'd never found out, her life would have felt as it always had. It was the discovery that changed it. When I was younger, I told my brothers that when our parents eventually died, no one should tell me for as long as possible. Let me go on and pretend they were just too busy to pick up the phone. Maybe even record a few messages to leave for me every now and again. I clearly feel as if what I don't know can't make me sad. It's not that I feel like I need to be protected from bad news. Well, maybe it is that. I think about that a lot, about how much of what defines us at various points in our lives is based on what we are told by the people we trust. Growing up, I had friends who told me they had exotic or interesting backgrounds, that they were part Sioux or Cherokee, hello, Cher, though we were just friends in my head. Or that their parents once spent the evening in a New York City nightclub with Muhammad Ali and his wife, or that a friend's mother had gone trick-or-treating with Judy Garland when they were kids, and the family lore I grew up around, the strange people my relatives knew, or the exciting places they'd visited, some of which turned out to be true, a lot of which turned out to be embellished, most of which was definitely curated, all goes into how we present ourselves, our lives, and our pasts to the world. As a young kid, I was a so-so athlete, so terrible, and I did almost comically poorly in school. I just don't understand how you can get a negative grade on an exam, my father said. I wasn't conscious of the fact that other kids in 6th grade showered and washed their hair regularly until a girl in my class said for Valentine's Day she was going to give me a heart-shaped bottle of Head & Shoulders. She did not. So while I was often oblivious to the world around me, I knew that secretly I was very special. Maybe it was the royal feet. In my defense, we were a weird family. We lived in a town where some of the people were waspy publishers and senior vice presidents of banks, and others owned the local hardware store or drove the school bus. Their kids, my peers, were not Jewish, and their parents did not come from New York City. And the kids whose parents were bankers went to private school, and I didn't, so I didn't really mix with them, except during tennis and riding lessons. I know how it sounds, but trust me, I was the worst one, and remember I had the greasy hair. And the kids I went to school with were all in church together, so I sort of felt like an outsider in 2 places. In college, I got into one. I found out I had a learning disability. Maybe I hadn't been so dumb or lazy in high school, and even though I hadn't been good at sports like field hockey or anything with a ball, really, I started running and going to the gym and found that if I worked at it consistently, I was actually pretty strong and fast. Give me that president's physical fitness test now. Fortunately, this all occurred when I was young enough to incorporate these notions and changes in my behavior into my life. After college, I came to the conclusion that I was not really good at working. I found a job working for a judgmental, hostile gentleman who criticized me constantly. So much so, in fact, that I assumed I was just terrible at my job. As I watched my friends begin to climb the ladders in their fields, earning more money and more responsibility, I was working at an insurance company and taking writing workshops on the side. I submitted one piece to a magazine, it was rejected, and then I decided that
Sample complete. Ready to continue?